Put both hands where I can see them, and do not make me discover something in that car, Sergeant Frank Duval said, loud enough for the night clerk behind the glass and every officer in the empty gas station to hear. Maya Carter stood beside Pump 4 at 12:17 after midnight, wearing a black hooded sweatshirt, faded jeans, and old work boots wet from the roadside puddles. Her gray sedan had a cracked taillight, a scratched bumper, and a delivery bag on the passenger seat. To anyone passing on Highway 17 outside Briar Glen, Georgia, she looked like a tired night driver who had picked the wrong gas station at the wrong hour. 3 police cruisers had rolled in without sirens. 1 blocked the north exit, 1 stopped beside the air pump, 1 angled across the narrow lane behind the car wash. The neon sign above the Midnight Star station flickered blue, then white, then blue again. Inside the store, Linda Harris stopped counting cigarettes and placed one trembling hand under the register. Maya did not run. She did not argue. She only looked at Duval and said, "You have no idea who you are threatening." Duval laughed. He thought the old car made her powerless. He thought the hooded sweatshirt made her forgettable. He thought the empty road meant no witness would matter. But inside, Maya's sleeve was a transmitter no local officer could see. Inside the gas station camera system was a backup file Linda had been too afraid to send. And within 20 minutes, federal vehicles would seal every exit. The man behind the car wash would drop a bag full of cash, and Duval would hear one sentence that would drain the color from his face. "Agent Carter, are you hurt?" But before that moment came, Maya placed her palms on the cold hood. She let the sergeant smile. She let the cameras watch, and she let the badge on his chest expose the man beneath it. The Midnight Star gas station looked like the last open place in the county. It sat on a flat stretch of Highway 17, 6 miles outside Briar Glen, where pine trees pressed close to the road and the darkness behind them seemed old. Trucks passed every few minutes, loud for 3 seconds and then gone. A broken ice machine hummed near the east wall. A plastic banner over the closed car wash snapped in the wind, showing the same faded words every time the light caught it. Free rinse with premium wash. No one had bought a wash there after midnight in months. Not honestly. Maya had noticed that on her second week in town. Tonight, she noticed everything again. The dark sport utility vehicle behind Wash Bay 3. The county patrol radio chatter going quiet at the wrong time. The way Linda Harris looked at the cruisers before she looked at Maya. The way Officer Kyle Mercer stepped out of the second cruiser and hesitated before closing his door. The way Sergeant Duval came forward with the calm confidence of a man who had used fear so many times, he no longer needed to raise his voice. He was 51, broad in the shoulders, with gray hair cut close and a jaw that seemed built for command. His uniform was neat. His badge shone under the lights. His boots struck the wet pavement slowly, not because he was cautious, but because he wanted the walk itself to be part of the warning. Behind him, Officer Brett Nolan leaned against his cruiser with one thumb in his belt. He was the kind of officer who didn't need to lead the cruelty. He only needed permission to enjoy it. Kyle Mercer stood farther back, younger, quieter, still deciding whether the uniform on his body belonged to the law or to the man giving orders. Duval stopped 10 feet from Maya. "What are you doing out here this late?" Maya held the fuel nozzle in the tank. "Buying gas." He smiled. "That mouth is going to make this difficult." I answered the question. "Do you think this is Atlanta?" "No." "Do you know where you are?" "Briar Glen." "Then act like it." The words landed with the weight of something used often. Linda heard them from behind the glass and lowered her eyes. Maya saw that. Fear had a local language here. It lived in small reactions. A clerk looking away, a mechanic closing early, a young officer pretending not to hear, a town learning that survival meant letting Duval finish his sentences. Maya removed the nozzle from the car and returned it to the pump. The display clicked once and showed the final amount. She took her receipt slowly because sudden movement around armed men could become a sentence in a report. Duval watched her hands. License. Maya reached into her pocket with 2 fingers and took out the identification built for the operation. Name, Maya Collins. Occupation, courier. Address, East Atlanta. The identity was clean, lawful, and supported by federal documentation. If Duval ran it properly, he would find nothing useful. That was why Maya watched his eyes instead of the license. He barely glanced at it. He had already decided what kind of woman she was before he asked for paper. "You come through here a lot," he said. "My route changes." "Not enough." Maya said nothing. Duval looked at the sedan. "Old car for someone driving nights. It runs. That is not what I asked. It was the answer." Brett Nolan laughed softly. Kyle did not. Duval stepped closer. "People moving through my town after midnight with cracked lights and out-of-county tags usually have a reason. Your town." Duval's eyes narrowed. "My patrol area." Maya held his gaze. "That is different." For 1 second, the wind seemed to stop. Linda's hand tightened under the register where a small storage drive was taped beneath the drawer. She had placed it there after the 3rd time Duval ordered her to delete footage from the car wash camera. The storage drive held fragments, not enough for a trial by itself, enough to show the pattern if the right person ever came. Linda did not know the woman at Pump 4 was that person. Not yet. She only knew the scene outside looked like the beginning of another night she would regret surviving in silence. Duval handed Maya license to Brett. "Run it." Brett walked back to the cruiser. Duval kept his eyes on Maya. "Open the trunk." Maya said, "I do not consent to a search." Duval smiled again, but this time there was irritation underneath it. "You hear that, Mercer?" Kyle looked up. "She does not consent." Brett called from the cruiser. "Nothing active. License returns clean." Duval did not turn around. "Clean does not mean innocent," Maya said. "It also does not mean guilty." He stepped close enough that she could smell mint gum and old coffee on his breath. "In this town, I decide what looks suspicious." Linda closed her eyes. She had heard versions of that sentence before. Ray Collins had heard it outside his repair shop. A teenager named Marcus Hill had heard it during a stop that ended with a charge his mother still fought. A motel worker had heard it after refusing to let officers search a guest room without paperwork. Every person who heard it learned the same lesson. Duval didn't need the law to be absent. He only needed people to believe he owned the part of it that touched them. Maya looked over his shoulder for less than a second. The sport utility vehicle behind the car wash remained still. The driver inside lifted a phone to his ear. Duval noticed her glance. His smile vanished. "What are you looking at?" "Nothing." "No, you saw something. I saw a parked vehicle. Closed business. Then maybe you should ask why it is parked there." Brett returned with the license. Duval took it without looking away from Maya. "Maybe I'm asking you questions tonight." Maya said, "Then ask lawful ones." Brett laughed again. Duval raised a hand to silence him. He wanted this controlled. A public humiliation loses power when too many people add noise. "Hands on the hood," Duval said. Maya stood still. "For what reason?" "Officer's safety." "I am not moving. You are challenging me. Asking for the reason is not a challenge." Duval's voice dropped. "It is when I am done being patient." Kyle shifted his weight. Maya saw the movement. So did Duval. "Mercer, watch her." Kyle straightened. "Yes, Sergeant?" The answer came too fast, fear answering before the man could think. Maya slowly placed both hands on the hood of the gray sedan. The metal was cold from the rain. A thin layer of dust mixed with water beneath her palms. Her right wrist rested near the black cord bracelet that looked cheap and ordinary. It was not. Daniel Reed and the federal team were 2 miles away in a surveillance van near the abandoned feed store. Maya knew their position. She knew the emergency signal range. She knew the backup route if the cruisers blocked the highway. She knew the car wash camera angles and the store interior blind spot behind the lottery machine. She knew all of it. But knowing did not make the hood less cold. It did not make the insult harmless. It did not erase the memory of every person who had stood like this without a federal team waiting nearby. Duval walked behind her. "You alone tonight?" Maya answered, "People know my route. That was not what I asked. It is what I answered." He leaned closer. "You are proud." "No." "Then what are you?" "Patient." The word bothered him. Proud people were easy to punish. Angry people were easy to write up. Frightened people were easy to move. Patient people made men like Duval nervous because patience meant the moment might not belong to him. He reached toward her jacket. Maya said, "Do not search my clothing without legal cause." Duval laughed softly. "Legal cause. Listen to you." Brett opened the rear door of Maya's sedan and began looking inside. Maya turned her head. "I did not give permission." Duval pressed one finger lightly against her shoulder, keeping her facing forward. "You do not run this stop. Neither do your feelings." Kyle's eyes flicked toward Duval. That line was true, and dangerous. Duval pointed to the back seat. Check the bag. Brett lifted the delivery bag from the passenger seat. Empty food wrappers, a flashlight, a folded thermal blanket, a phone charger. No weapon, no drugs, no money, nothing that could make the story Duval wanted. Brett looked annoyed. Duval saw it. No evidence made him less calm, not more. He walked to the trunk and tapped it twice. Open it, Maya said. I do not consent. Duval leaned close to her ear. You keep saying that like somebody important is listening. Maya felt the cold hood under her palms. She thought of the small brass token in her jacket pocket, the one that had belonged to her father from the old Savannah bus depot. David Carter had carried it for years because he said public service was supposed to move people safely through the dark, not stop them in it. When Maya joined the Federal Bureau of Investigation, she put that token in her field jacket, not for luck, for memory. Now she pressed her thumb gently against the edge of the hood and said, Somebody is always listening eventually. Duval stopped smiling. What does that mean? It means records last longer than fear. Brett opened the glove compartment and pulled out a stack of delivery receipts. She is just running food, he said. Duval snapped, Keep looking. Kyle glanced at Brett, then at the trunk, then at Duval. Sergeant, the license is clean and there is no visible violation. Duval turned slowly. What did you say? Kyle swallowed. I said there is no visible violation. Duval stared at him with the quiet fury of a man who expected loyalty to arrive without delay. You are 6 months in, Mercer. Do not teach me patrol work. Kyle lowered his eyes. Yes, Sergeant. But Maya heard the crack. So did Linda behind the glass, and from inside the dark sport utility vehicle, the driver began to move. The rear door opened slightly. The edge of a black gym bag appeared near the seat. A white paper band around something inside caught the neon light for half a second. Maya saw it. Duval saw her see it. Everything changed. He stepped in front of her so fast his boot splashed through a shallow puddle. That vehicle is not your concern. I did not say it was. Your face did. Maya looked at him. You read faces now. Duval lowered his voice. I read people who do not belong. Brett closed the car door and came around the rear of the sedan. Want cuffs? Duval did not answer immediately. He was thinking. Maya watched him through the reflection in the windshield. She could see Kyle near the second cruiser, tense and silent. She could see Linda inside, one hand under the counter. She could see Brett smiling without humor. She could see Duval trying to decide how far he could push before midnight turned into paperwork. Then he made the mistake. He leaned close and spoke softly enough to feel private, but clearly enough for the recorder sewn into Maya's jacket seam. You have 2 choices. Leave Briar Glen tonight and forget what you think you saw, or I make your car say something about you by morning. Maya did not move. The words entered the device. They entered the backup audio. They entered the night. She asked, What will my car say? Duval's face hardened. Whatever I need it to. Kyle looked up sharply. Linda gasped behind the glass. Even Brett stopped smiling. For a moment, Duval did not realize what he had done. Men protected by silence often forget what their own voices sound like when silence is gone. Maya turned her head just enough to meet his eyes. That was very clear. Duval frowned. Then his gaze dropped to the seam of her jacket, a tiny outline beneath the fabric. His expression changed. What is that? Maya said. Your warning? He grabbed the edge of the hidden device and pulled it free. The small recorder sat between his fingers under the flickering neon light. The parking lot seemed to hold its breath. Duval looked from the device to Maya. Who are you? Maya did not answer. Brett stepped forward. Sergeant, Kyle whispered, Stop. Duval turned on him. No, you stop. Then he faced Maya again. You are not leaving with this. Maya said, You are holding federal evidence. Duval laughed once. Federal. He did not believe it. That was his final mistake. He believed power had to announce itself in a suit, a badge, a marked vehicle, a title he already respected. He did not believe it could stand in front of him in wet boots and a black hooded sweatshirt, letting him talk himself into a case file. Brett reached toward Maya's wrists. Duval said, Cuff her. Kyle did not move. Brett did. Maya's thumb pressed the hidden transmitter inside the bracelet. One small pressure, no sound, no light. 2 miles away, in the federal surveillance van, Daniel Reed saw the emergency signal turn green. He sat forward. Agent Carter signaled. The technical agent beside him checked the live map. Pump 4, 3 local cruisers, car wash vehicle still present. Daniel lifted the radio. All teams move in, now, no sirens until contact. At the Midnight Star, Duvall twisted the recorder in his hand. You picked a bad night to play games. Maya looked past him toward the north road. No, Sergeant. Headlights appeared beyond the trees, then more from the south, then 2 behind the car wash. Maya finished. I picked the night you finally played yours in front of witnesses. Duvall turned. Black federal vehicles rolled into the station with controlled speed, blocking every exit. Doors opened almost at the same time. Agents stepped out with weapons lowered but ready, commands sharp, positions clean, movements practiced. Daniel Reed crossed the pavement holding his identification high. Federal Bureau of Investigation, hands visible. Nobody moves. Brett froze with the cuffs in his hand. Kyle raised both palms. Linda began to cry. Duvall still held the recorder. Daniel looked at him. Step away from Agent Carter. The name struck the gas station like thunder. Agent Carter. Kyle stared at Maya. Brett went pale. Linda covered her mouth. Duvall looked at the woman he had pushed against the hood, and all the details he had dismissed came back in the wrong order. The calm voice, the careful answers, the patience, the glance at the car wash, the warning about records. Maya lifted her hands from the hood slowly. Her palms were wet. Her wrist hurt. Her face stayed still. You heard me ask for the law, she said. You just did not think someone like me could carry it. Behind the car wash, federal agents pulled open the dark sport utility vehicle. The driver tried to reach down, but an agent stopped him. Another agent dragged the black gym bag onto the pavement. It hit the ground with a heavy sound. The zipper split open. Bundles of cash showed under the neon lights. A folded sheet slipped partly out beside them. License plates, business names, patrol windows. Duvall stared. The night he thought he controlled had become evidence, and the woman he thought he could scare away had just become the center of the investigation. But 3 months before that cold night at Pump 4, Maya Carter entered Briar Glen with no visible badge, no partner beside her, and no promise that the town would speak when the time came. Her name in the local system was Maya Collins, night courier, temporary driver, a woman who took food orders across county lines, bought cheap coffee after midnight, and drove an old gray sedan that looked one bad week away from the junkyard. That identity was not an accident. It was built carefully inside a secure conference room at the Federal Bureau of Investigation field office in Atlanta. The operation file had a plain brown cover and a case label that meant nothing to anyone outside the Public Corruption Task Force. Operation Lantern Creek, case number Lantern Creek 219. The first complaint inside the file had come from Ray Collins, the owner of Collins Auto Repair, a small garage less than a mile from the Midnight Star gas station. Ray wrote that patrol cars had started appearing outside his business after he refused to give money to a towing operator named Trevor Mills. At first, the money was called a road safety contribution. Then it became a peace arrangement. Then it became something darker. Ray wrote, "If I did not pay, my customers got stopped before they reached the highway." The second complaint came from a motel clerk who said officers visited after she refused to let them search a guest room without paperwork. The third came from a mother named Janice Hill, whose son Marcus was arrested after a late-night traffic stop. The report said Marcus looked nervous. The body camera file had no clear audio for the search. A small plastic packet appeared in the vehicle after the camera pointed at the ground. Marcus said it was not his. The report said he denied ownership. Those were not the same thing. Maya read that line twice. People with power love turning plain fear into suspicious behavior. They wrote shaken hands as guilt. They wrote questions as resistance. They wrote silence as attitude. Then the paper looked clean enough for a court, while the person inside the story looked dirty enough to ignore. That was why Maya never trusted a report until she found the facts underneath it. Agent Daniel Reed stood beside the evidence wall that morning, placing photographs in a careful row. He was my partner on the task force, calm in the way only people become after seeing too many rushed cases fall apart. He pointed first to Frank Duvall. 15 years in Briar Glen Police Department, Daniel said. Sergeant for 6, commendations for highway enforcement, public praise from Captain Harold Briggs. Most complaints closed internally. Maya looked at Duvall's photograph, neat uniform, hard smile, eyes that looked through the camera instead of into it. Daniel placed another photograph on the wall. Brett Nolan, senior patrol officer, often assigned to Duval night shift. Camera failures in 4 stops we are reviewing. Then another, Kyle Mercer, new officer, 6 months on the force. No major complaint before joining Duval unit. Maya looked at the young face, too clean to be innocent by default, too new to be written off as lost. She asked, what changed after he joined Duval? Daniel answered, his report started using the same language, nervous behavior, unknown movement, officer safety concern. Maya looked down at the file. Language spreads faster than corruption sometimes. Daniel nodded. Sometimes it carries corruption. The next photograph was Linda Harris, night clerk, 58. 11 years at the Midnight Star. She had reported camera issues 7 times in 8 months, but never filed a formal complaint against police. On 2 maintenance requests, she wrote that the car wash camera failed only after midnight. On one, she wrote, ask Sergeant Duval why the system keeps changing. That sentence was later crossed out. Maya touched the edge of the photograph. She wanted to speak. She was scared after she did. Daniel said, that is our read. The plan formed slowly. Not a raid, not a press conference, not a dramatic confrontation. Maya would enter as a pattern, a delivery driver who belonged to the road but not the town, someone visible enough for Duval to notice, ordinary enough for him to underestimate. She would stop at the Midnight Star at changing times, learn the camera angles, watch the car wash, identify the sport utility vehicle that appeared during suspicious nights, and build contact with witnesses without making them feel hunted from both sides. Daniel would remain outside town with the surveillance team. They would not move until money, witness intimidation, unlawful stop behavior, or direct obstruction met in one scene. That was the rule. Maya accepted it, but accepting the rule did not make it easy. The first week was all silence. Briar Glen was small enough to look harmless from the highway. It had a courthouse clock that ran slow, a diner with red stools, a pharmacy that closed at 6, and a church sign that changed every Sunday. People waved in daylight, doors locked early at night. The road past the gas station went dark after the last dinner shift ended. Maya learned the rhythm by becoming part of it. She bought coffee at 11:34, gas at 12:06, a bottle of water at 1:15. A pack of gum she never opened. Linda served her without conversation the first 3 nights. On the 4th, Linda said, roads get strange after midnight. Maya answered, roads usually show what daytime hides. Linda looked at her then, really looked, then looked away. That was the first opening. Maya did not push. People who had survived years of fear did not trust quickly because a stranger sounded kind. On the 6th night, Ray Collins left his repair shop at 11:52 and saw Maya parked near the old ice machine. He stopped with his key halfway to the lock. He knew a stranger watching the gas station could be another danger. In Briar Glen, people had learned not to decide too quickly who was safe. Maya did not approach him. She only started her car and left. The next morning, Daniel received a message from Ray through the protected number. Gray sedan again. Is that yours? Daniel replied with 3 words. Stay open. Safe. Ray did not answer for 2 days. Then he sent the first list of payment dates. $200, $300, $500, $750. Each amount had a night beside it. Each night matched a patrol cluster near the Midnight Star. Each patrol cluster matched a camera reset window. The map started breathing. By the 3rd week, Maya understood that Duval did not control Briar Glen by constant violence. That would have been too obvious. He controlled it through uncertainty. A patrol car parked where it should not. A business inspection after a complaint. A body camera that failed only during the important minute. A report written with careful phrases. A young man told that fighting the charge would cost more than pleading. A clerk told that footage could create liability. A mechanic told peace had a price. Fear became a system when every person thought they were facing it alone. Maya wrote that in her field notebook after a long night in the surveillance van. Fear separates witnesses. Daniel read the line and said, then the case has to connect them. That became the real mission, not only catching Duval, connecting the people he had separated. Linda gave the next piece without speaking. Maya ordered coffee just after midnight, and Linda placed the cup on a paper sleeve with a small crease folded into one corner. Maya walked outside, removed the cup, and saw 4 words written inside the sleeve. Wash Bay 3, Tuesday. Maya dropped the sleeve into the outside trash can as if it meant nothing. Daniel recovered it 11 minutes later with gloves. Federal technicians pulled old utility records for the car wash. Wash Bay 3 was listed as closed for repairs, but its electrical draw rose on the same nights the gas station camera system showed gaps. The power did not prove a crime. It proved presence where absence had been reported. That mattered. Then Ray confirmed Trevor Mills. Mills owned a towing company that worked county calls and private roadside recovery. His dark sport utility vehicle appeared near the wash bay on 3 nights tied to cash payments. His phone number showed up in a screenshot Ray had saved. The message read, "Keep the South Road clear if you want no trouble after closing." No signature. But Ray knew who sent Trevor. Everyone did. Knowing was not enough. Proof had to carry what fear could not. On the 31st night, Maya watched Duvall stop a delivery driver outside the diner. The driver was Latino, young, and visibly exhausted. Duvall kept him on the curb for 22 minutes. Brett Nolan searched the vehicle while his body camera faced the pavement. Kyle Mercer stood near the rear bumper, looking uncomfortable and saying nothing. Maya sat half a block away in the gray sedan and gripped the steering wheel so hard her knuckles ached. Daniel's voice came through the hidden earpiece. "Hold position." Maya did not answer. "Hold position," Daniel repeated. She knew he was right. The case still needed the chain. Duvall, Mills, money, messages, pattern, witnesses. But the driver on the curb did not feel like a pattern. He felt like a person. That was the burden of undercover work. "You saw harm before you could stop all of it?" Maya drove back to the rented safe room outside town at 3 a.m. and sat alone in the dark for a full minute before turning on the light. The room smelled like dust and old wood. A folding table held camera batteries, maps, coffee cups, and a charger strip. She took the small brass transit token from her pocket and placed it on the table. It had belonged to her father, David Carter. He worked most of his life repairing city buses in Savannah. He believed public service meant carrying people through dark streets safely. He used to tell Maya that authority was like a steering wheel. In steady hands, it brought people home. In careless hands, it could drive them into danger and still claim it was following the road. After he died, Maya found the token inside his old toolbox, wrapped in a cloth beside a wrench with his initials scratched into the handle. She kept it because it reminded her what authority was supposed to do. Move people safely, not trap them. That night she wanted to quit the slow path and call the takedown early. She wanted Duvall in cuffs before sunrise. She wanted Linda out from behind the glass. She wanted Ray to stop paying. She wanted Kyle to choose before he became too comfortable with not choosing. But a weak arrest would feed Duvall. He would call it political. Captain Briggs would call it overreach. Brett would say Maya misunderstood field conditions. Linda would deny. Ray would disappear. Kyle would learn that silence remained safer than truth. So Maya picked up the token again. She whispered, "Not yet." Then she went back the next night. The breakthrough came in pieces after that. Linda changed the camera backup setting to off-site storage under the station owner account. She did it during a register update, pretending to fix a receipt printer error. Her hands shook so badly that she entered the password wrong twice. Ray gave Daniel a second list of dates. A food truck owner confirmed Trevor Mills collected money near the county storage road. A motel clerk remembered a plate number from a cruiser that parked outside after she refused an unlawful search. And Kyle Mercer did something nobody expected. He did not report Duvall. He did not confront Brett. He did not call the Federal Bureau. But he started leaving his body camera on longer than the others knew. At first it looked like mistake. Then pattern. A few extra minutes before stops. A few extra minutes after Duvall told him to cut. One recording showed Duvall saying, "The report only needs to match what we can defend." That line was not enough alone. But it told Maya that Kyle was no longer only afraid. He was preserving something. A man can be late to courage and still arrive before the final door closes. On the night before the gas station confrontation, Daniel gathered the team in the safe room at 10:20 in the evening. Maps covered one wall. The Midnight Star camera angles were marked in blue. Patrol positions were marked in red. The car wash and wash bay 3 were circled in black. Daniel said, "Trevor Mills is expected to move tonight. Ray signal confirms possible payment route. Linda backup is active. Maya enters as normal. No contact unless Duvall escalates or the handoff begins." An agent checked the transmitter bracelet. Clear signal. Another checked the SIM recorder. Clear audio. Daniel looked at Maya. You are not bait. You're the observer until he gives us cause. Maya nodded. I know the line. Daniel held her gaze. Lines move fast in places like that. She put the brass token in her jacket pocket. Then we hold the right one. At 12:08 after midnight, Maya drove through Briar Glen under a sky with no moon. The town was quiet in the way a room gets quiet when people are listening behind doors. She passed Collins Auto Repair and saw one office lamp blink twice. Ray signal. The payment route was active. At 12:11, Linda sent one silent register code to the federal monitoring device. Dark vehicle at Wash Bay. Maya drove on. At 12:17, she turned into the Midnight Star and stopped at Pump 4. The old gray sedan settled under the neon light. The car wash waited behind her. The store glass reflected Linda's face. The sport utility vehicle sat near Wash Bay 3. For one brief second, Maya was alone in the role she had chosen. Courier, stranger, woman at midnight. Then the first police cruiser appeared from the North Road. The quiet endurance had done its work. Now, all that remained was whether the truth could survive the moment Duval finally noticed it. The first cruiser entered the Midnight Star slowly, as if the driver wanted the tires to be heard on the wet pavement. The second cruiser followed from the South Road and stopped near the air pump. The third came in without headlights for the last 20 yards, then turned sideways across the narrow lane that led behind the car wash. Maya Carter kept one hand on the fuel pump handle and one hand near the side of her gray sedan. She didn't turn too quickly. She didn't reach for the phone. She didn't look toward the hidden transmitter. Training helped, but training did not erase the old human knowledge that 3 police cars around one woman at midnight could make the body remember every story it had ever heard. Inside the store, Linda Harris stopped moving. Her fingers were still wrapped around the edge of the register drawer. The small storage drive was taped beneath it, held in place by a strip of old silver tape. She had touched that tape so many times over the last week that the corner had begun to peel. Tonight, she could feel it give under her fingernail. Outside, Sergeant Frank Duval stepped from the first cruiser. He didn't rush. Rushing looked nervous. Duval did not like to look nervous. He liked to make other people look that way. Officer Brett Nolan came out of the second cruiser with a crooked smile and one hand resting near his belt. Officer Kyle Mercer stepped out last, closing his door softly, eyes moving from Maya to the pump, from the pump to the store camera, and then to the dark sport utility vehicle near Wash Bay 3. Kyle had seen that vehicle before, never in a report, always in the wrong places. Duval stopped beside the front of Maya's sedan and looked at the fuel display. Late night for a delivery route. Maya placed the pump handle back into its cradle. Late routes pay better. He looked at her hooded sweatshirt, her wet boots, the old sedan, and the delivery bag on the passenger seat. Not much better. Brett chuckled. Maya said nothing. Duval waited for irritation. He was good at pulling it from people. A sharp answer helped him. A raised voice helped him. A hand movement helped him. He could turn ordinary fear into language that sounded official by morning. Subject became argumentative. Subject made furtive movement. Subject failed to follow simple instructions. But Maya gave him nothing careless. That made him work harder. Identification. Maya removed the license slowly and handed it over between 2 fingers. Duval took it and held it under the station light. Maya Collins. Yes, East Atlanta. Yes, you know this is not East Atlanta. I know where I am standing. His eyes lifted. That is not the same as knowing where you are. The line was meant to sound like a warning. Linda heard it from behind the glass and felt her throat tighten. She had heard Duval talk that way to people before he searched them. It was not the words alone, it was the ownership inside them. Briar Glen did not have to belong to him for him to speak like it did. Duval handed the license to Brett. Run it, slow. Brett smiled and walked back to the cruiser. Slow meant delay. Delay meant pressure. Pressure made people tired enough to consent to things they had a right to refuse. Maya knew the tactic. She kept her shoulders level. Duval pointed at the delivery bag through the window. What is in there? Empty thermal bag, charger, receipts. Open the door. Am I being detained? Duval leaned slightly closer. You are being asked a question. I answered the question. Open the door. Do you have legal grounds to search the vehicle? Kyle lowered his eyes. He knew the answer. Duval also knew it. That was why he smiled. My grounds are that I am investigating suspicious behavior at a closed business corridor after midnight. Maya looked toward the car wash. The gas station is open. He followed her eyes. I didn't ask what is open. Maya turned back. Then, be specific. Brett called from the cruiser. License is clean. No warrants, no active flags. Duval did not like the clean result. Clean people complicated dirty work. He took a step closer and lowered his voice enough to feel intimate, but not enough to avoid the recorder sewn into Maya's jacket. People with nothing to hide usually cooperate. Maya answered, "People with rights do not lose them because cooperation is convenient." Brett returned and tossed the license onto the hood instead of handing it to her. It slid through a thin line of rainwater and stopped near Maya's left hand. Kyle looked at the license. That small disrespect hit him harder than it should have. Maybe because he knew it was unnecessary. Maybe because unnecessary cruelty told the truth about necessary power. Duval pointed at the hood. "Hands there." Maya did not move. "For what purpose?" "Officer safety. I have made no threat. Your tone is enough. My tone is not a weapon." Duval's smile vanished. "It can become one if I write it right." That sentence landed. Kyle looked up. Linda took one step back from the register. Maya studied Duval's face. "Say that again." He realized he had said too much too soon. He changed direction. "Brett, check the front compartment." Maya said, "I do not consent to a search." Duval looked at Kyle. "Did you hear resistance?" Kyle hesitated. "She said she does not consent." That was not the answer Duval wanted. He turned slowly. "I asked if you heard resistance." Kyle felt Brett's eyes on him. He felt the weight of the uniform. He felt the old fear of being marked disloyal. He said, "I heard refusal of consent." Maya did not look at him, but she heard the difference. So did Duval. Brett opened the passenger door before anyone answered further. He lifted the delivery bag, shook it once, then looked inside. The bag was empty except for folded receipts and a flashlight. Nothing. He dropped it back onto the seat as if the lack of evidence had offended him. Duval walked around the sedan and looked through the rear window. "This car is old," Maya said. "Yes, old cars have hiding places. New cars do too." Brett laughed again. Duval looked at him sharply. Brett stopped. Duval wanted to control the humiliation himself. He tapped the trunk with the heel of his flashlight. "Open it." Maya answered, "No." The word was calm, too calm. Duval leaned near her shoulder. "No is a dangerous word on a dark road." Maya turned her head a little. Only when the person hearing it thinks power means ownership. His eyes hardened. Kyle looked toward his body camera. Before leaving the station that night, he had switched it on and covered the indicator light with a tiny piece of black tape. He told himself it was just in case. He told himself Duval would never know. He told himself recording was not the same as speaking. That comfort began to fall apart. Because now he was hearing words he could not unhear. Brett moved near the open cruiser door. His right hand dipped toward the side pocket. Maya saw the motion in the reflection of her driver's side window. Kyle saw it directly. Brett's hand came back half closed. A small plastic packet rested against his palm, hidden by his fingers. White powder clung to one inside corner. Kyle's stomach tightened. He had heard jokes. He had ignored them. He had told himself older officers were only talking tough, but a joke in a locker room was now a packet in a hand. Maya spoke before Duval could tap the trunk again. Officer Nolan should open his right hand. Brett froze. Duval's face changed. "What did you say?" Maya kept both hands visible. His right hand is closed. It was open before he reached into the cruiser. Brett snapped, "You watch too much." Maya answered, "Tonight, that is the point." Duval turned toward Brett. For a fraction of a second, irritation crossed his face. Not because Brett had done something wrong, but because he had done it too visibly. "Open your hand," Kyle said. The words came from behind Duval, small, shaken, but real. Brett stared at him. "Excuse me." Kyle swallowed. "Open your hand." Duval took one step toward Kyle. "Mercer." Kyle did not look away from Brett. "If there is nothing, open it." Linda gripped the register so hard her knuckles paled. The storage drive tape tore loose beneath her finger. Brett slowly opened his hand. The packet sat in his palm. Nobody spoke. The gas station lights buzzed overhead. Maya looked at Duval. "Is that part of the legal search too?" Duval moved quickly. He took the packet from Brett and slipped it into his own jacket pocket. "Evidence control," he said. Maya answered, "Without a log, without gloves." After it appeared in Officer Nolan's hand during an unlawful search attempt, Duval stepped toward her. "You are building a story." "No." Maya looked at the camera above the store door. "You are." Inside the store, Linda finally moved, not toward the back room, not away from the glass. She slid the storage drive into her sweater sleeve and pressed a hidden key sequence on the register screen. The backup camera system began uploading the live feed to the off-site storage account she had created 2 weeks earlier. Her hands shook through every number, but she didn't stop. Duval didn't see it. He was too focused on Maya. He returned to her with his voice lower than before. "You think because you know a few words, you understand how this ends." Maya said, "I understand how records work." He leaned closer. "Records are written by people with badges." Maya held his gaze, and corrected by people with evidence. That was when he saw the slight shape beneath the seam of her jacket, not the transmitter, the recorder. He stared at it. Maya knew he had noticed. The night tightened around them. Duval reached toward her jacket. "Do not touch my clothing." He ignored her and pulled the small recorder free. The device sat in his hand under the neon light. Brett whispered something Maya could not hear. Kyle took 1/2 step forward, then stopped. Duval stared at the recorder. His face did not show fear first. It showed insult. He was offended that someone he considered beneath him had preserved his words. "What is this?" Maya answered, "A mirror." His jaw moved. "Who sent you?" Maya said nothing. "Who sent you?" The sport utility vehicle behind Wash Bay 3 started its engine. Everyone heard it. Duval turned his head quickly toward the sound, too quickly. Maya saw the panic before he could hide it. The driver inside the dark vehicle opened the door a few inches. A black gym bag was visible behind the front seat. The shape was low and heavy, one corner pressed against the floor mat like it held more than clothes. Duval snapped, "Stay there." He was not speaking to Maya. Kyle noticed, Brett noticed, Linda noticed from the store window. Maya looked at Duval. "You just gave an order to the man in the car wash." Duval stepped back toward her. "No, I gave an order to the scene. That is not a scene. That is a person." Brett moved closer with his cuffs. "Sergeant, we need to control her." Duval looked at Maya. "Yes." Then he said the word he would regret. "Cuff her." Kyle did not move. Brett did. Maya felt her heartbeat once in her throat. Not fear, timing. Her right thumb pressed the hidden transmitter inside the black bracelet. One touch, no sound, no light, no warning to the men standing around her. 2 miles away, inside a dark surveillance van parked behind an abandoned feed store, a green signal appeared on Daniel Reed monitor. The technical agent said, "Agent Carter has activated emergency." Daniel was already standing. "Local cruisers around Pump 4. Another agent looked at the live aerial feed. Dark sport utility vehicle still behind Wash Bay 3. Driver door open. Daniel lifted the radio. "All teams, Lantern Creek entry. Move now. Secure the car wash and Pump 4. No sirens until arrival. Engines started in the dark." At the gas station, Duval held the recorder in one hand and reached for Maya's wrist with the other. "You picked the wrong town to play federal games," he said. Maya looked at him. He stopped. The word federal had left his mouth without permission, because part of him knew, not enough to stop, enough to fear. Maya said, "You said it, not me." Duval's face tightened. Brett looked from Duval to Maya. Kyle looked toward the north road. Linda stepped from behind the counter and unlocked the front door. The little bell above it gave one soft ring. Duval turned sharply. "Linda, stay inside." For years that voice had worked. This time, Linda held the storage drive inside her sleeve and opened the door wider. "No," she said. The word came out barely above a whisper, but everyone heard it. Duval stared at her. Maya did not move. This was how fear began to lose, not all at once, one small refusal at a time. Then headlights appeared on the north road. More lights rose from the south. 2 more cut across the gravel lane behind the car wash. Brett lowered the cuffs slightly. Kyle raised both hands before anyone ordered him to. Duval turned in a slow circle, seeing exits become walls. Black federal vehicles entered the station with controlled speed. No sirens, no chaos, just doors opening, agents stepping out, commands delivered with the cold clarity of people who had the authority Duval had pretended to own. Daniel Reed crossed the pavement with his identification raised. "Federal Bureau of Investigation, keep your hands visible. Nobody moves." Duval held still, not because he obeyed, because he finally understood that the night had been bigger than him. An agent behind the car wash shouted for the driver of the dark sport utility vehicle to step away from the door. Another agent pulled the black gym bag into view and ordered him to his knees. The bag hit the wet pavement with a heavy thud. The sound carried across the station. Linda began to cry. Kyle looked at the packet shape inside Duval's jacket pocket, then at the recorder in his hand, then at Maya. Daniel stopped beside her. "Agent Carter, are you injured?" The words changed every face at the Midnight Star. Agent Carter. Not Maya Collins. Not courier. Not suspect. Duval looked at her as if her true name had struck him harder than a fist. Maya slowly lifted her hands away from the hood. Her palms were damp. Her wrist ached. Her voice was steady. "You had several chances to stop at the law, Sergeant." Behind the car wash, the gym bag zipper opened under an agent hand. Cash showed first, then a folded page with plate numbers, then a notebook wrapped in plastic. Maya looked from the bag to Duval. "But you kept going until you reached yourself." Maya Carter said it quietly, yet every person under the Midnight Star lights heard the sentence settle on Sergeant Frank Duval like a locked door. Daniel Reed stood beside her with his identification still raised. Behind him, the federal entry team moved without panic. One agent covered the store entrance. 2 agents secured the cruisers. Another team surrounded the dark sport utility vehicle behind Wash Bay 3. A technical agent carried a camera and photographed everything before any hand touched it. That was the difference between power and procedure. Duval used power to make people afraid. Daniel used procedure to make the truth survive. The gym bag lay open on the wet pavement behind the car wash. Cash bundles filled the center. A folded page showed rows of license plate numbers. A notebook, wrapped in clear plastic, sat beside 2 mobile phones. Near the rear tire, the driver of the vehicle knelt with both hands behind his head, rain dripping from his hair onto the gravel. His name was Trevor Mills. Maya knew it from the file. Towing operator, county contractor, unofficial messenger, officially invisible. Daniel looked at the agent near the bag. "Call the visible inventory." The agent answered. Cash bundles, folded plate list, notebook in plastic, 2 phones, 1 root envelope, 1 small ledger. Duval turned his head toward the car wash. His face was still trying to be angry, but anger had begun to lose its shape. He was calculating now. How much did they know? Who had talked? What had been recorded? Which mistake could still be explained? Maya watched the questions move through his eyes. That was the first time she had seen him look like the people he stopped, trapped by another person's version of the night. Daniel pointed at the recorder in Duval's hand. "Place that device on the ground with 2 fingers. Duval looked down as if he had forgotten he was still holding it. This device was taken from a suspect during a lawful field investigation. Maya said, "No. It was removed from a federal agent during an unlawful detention." Duval glared at her. Daniel's voice stayed even. "Ground, now." Duval slowly lowered the recorder to the pavement. The technical agent photographed it where it landed, then used gloves to place it into a clear evidence bag. Evidence item 1. Audio recorder recovered from Sergeant Frank Duval at Pump 4. Time 12:36 after midnight. The technician wrote the number on the bag. Small ink. Huge consequence. Maya looked toward Kyle Mercer. The young officer stood near the second cruiser with his hands raised, face pale, body camera still fixed to his chest. The strip of black tape over the light looked almost childish now, like the act of a man who had wanted the truth to exist without having to admit he wanted it. Daniel noticed. "Officer Mercer, keep your hands visible. Do not touch your camera." Kyle nodded quickly. "Yes, sir," Duval snapped. "Mercer, keep your mouth shut until the department counsel arrives." Daniel turned toward him. "You do not give instructions to witnesses." The word witnesses struck Duval harder than the command. He had always spoken to Kyle as property, rookie, backup, my officer. Now Daniel had changed the category. Kyle was no longer standing behind Duval. He was standing in the record. Maya saw the change in Kyle's face. Fear did not leave him, but it found competition. Daniel nodded to another agent. "Recover Officer Mercer body camera and secure a separate statement." The agent approached Kyle slowly. Kyle said, "It has been recording since we entered the station." Duval stared. Brett Nolan turned toward Kyle with disbelief. Kyle did not look at either of them. He kept his eyes on the wet pavement and said, "I covered the light because I was afraid he would make me turn it off." The sentence was almost too soft, but the camera caught it. The agents caught it. Linda caught it from the store doorway. And Maya caught something more important. A man beginning to tell the truth before he had figured out how it would save him. Daniel asked, "Did your camera capture the packet in Officer Nolan's hand?" Kyle swallowed. "Yes," Brett shouted. "He is lying." Kyle flinched but did not retreat. "I saw you take it from the cruiser pocket." Brett stepped forward. An agent stopped him with one command: "Hold." Brett froze. Daniel looked at Duvall. "The item you placed in your jacket pocket will be recovered now." Duvall's voice hardened. "You need a warrant." Daniel answered, "You are on scene during a federal corruption operation, holding potential evidence connected to an attempted search and evidence tampering. You will keep your hands visible." An agent approached Duvall, removed the small plastic packet from his jacket pocket, photographed it, and sealed it. Evidence item 2, small plastic packet recovered from Sergeant Duvall's jacket pocket after observation by Agent Carter and Officer Mercer. Brett muttered, "This is a setup." Maya looked at him. "A setup would require us to invent your hand." He said nothing after that. Inside the store doorway, Linda Harris still held the storage drive inside her sleeve. The night air touched her face, but she had not fully stepped into the lot. For 11 years, the glass door had been her shield and her prison. She had watched through it, hidden behind it, pretended not to know what happened beyond it. Tonight, the door was open. But her feet still knew fear. Duvall saw her. "Linda," he said, just her name. No threat, no curse. But the old command was inside it. Linda's shoulders tightened. Maya turned. "Miss Harris, you are safe to stay where you are. An agent will come to you." Linda looked at Maya. Her lips trembled. "I have the drive." Duvall's voice sharpened. "Linda." Daniel raised one hand toward Duvall. "Do not address her." Linda stepped forward one pace. "I kept copies," she said. The parking lot changed again. Not loudly, no one shouted, but the truth had gained a second body. An evidence agent approached with a clear bag. Linda pulled the small storage drive from her sleeve. For a moment, it almost slipped from her fingers. Maya took one step closer but did not touch her. This had to be Linda's choice from beginning to end. Linda placed the drive into the evidence bag, evidence item 3. Digital storage drive provided by Linda Harris, night clerk at Midnight Star. Time 12:42 after midnight. Daniel asked softly, "What is on the drive?" Linda looked at Duvall, then at Ray Collins' empty road beyond the station, then at Maya. Video copies, not full nights, pieces, the car wash, the envelopes, the night Ray paid, the night a driver was searched and the main camera went dark. "I saved what I could before they made me delete the local files," Duvall said. "She was never ordered to delete anything." Linda looked at him through tears. "You stood at that counter and told me bad footage could get the station sued. You said if I cared about my job, I would let police handle police business." Duvall shook his head. "That is not an order." Linda's voice grew stronger. "It was when your cruiser sat outside my sister's apartment the next morning." Everything froze. Daniel turned to Maya. Maya nodded once. That point had been in the file as a suspicion. Now it was a statement. Daniel said into his radio, "Add witness intimidation involving family residents to the active statement points." The radio crackled back. "Confirmed." Duvall looked at Linda with pure fury, but he could not move toward her. 2 agents stood between them. For the first time, Linda saw his anger fail to reach her. She cried harder because safety sometimes arrives so late that the body does not know what to do with it. Behind the car wash, Trevor Mills spoke for the first time. "I want a lawyer." Daniel looked over. "You will have counsel. Keep your hands visible." Trevor nodded fast. He looked toward Duvall, waiting for some sign that the old arrangement still existed. Duvall gave him nothing. Or maybe he had nothing left to give. An agent opened one of the phones only far enough to place it into a powered evidence container for later extraction. Another agent photographed the folded plate list. The names were visible now. Collins Auto Repair, Midnight Star, Pine Rest Motel, Santos Food Truck. License numbers and patrol windows ran beside them. Kyle stared at the list. His face changed. Maya saw it. "You recognize those?" Kyle whispered, "Some of them." Daniel turned to him. "From where?" Kyle looked at Duvall, then he looked back at Daniel. "Briefing notes, informal ones. Duvall said they were problem vehicles. He told us if we saw them near the highway after dark, we should find a reason to stop them." Brett said, "Shut up, Kyle." Kyle shook his head. "No. One word, small, late, but alive." Duvall stepped toward him, and an agent immediately blocked the movement. Kyle looked at Maya. "I knew some stops felt wrong. I told myself I was new. I told myself I did not understand how patrol really worked. Maya said, "And now?" Kyle swallowed. "Now I think I was learning the wrong things from the wrong man." Duval barked, "You think they will protect you after you turn on your own?" Kyle looked at him for the first time. "You were not my own. You were my excuse." That sentence broke something open. Linda lowered her face and wept. Brett looked away. Daniel held still, letting the statement remain untouched for one full breath before procedure resumed. "Officer Mercer, you will be interviewed separately. Your cooperation does not erase your conduct, but it matters that you are choosing accuracy now." Kyle nodded. "I understand." Duval laughed, but the sound came out thin. "Accuracy. This is theater." Maya stepped closer to him. "No. Theater is 3 cruisers surrounding a woman buying gas so a payoff can continue behind a car wash." He leaned toward her. "You cannot prove I knew about that bag." Daniel lifted a tablet from the technical agent. "Maybe you should hear what Trevor Mills' phone preview shows before you decide which denial to use." Duval went still. Daniel read from the screen. "Message received at 12:13 after midnight. Gray sedan at pump 4 again." Daniel scrolled. "Reply from contact saved as FD. Keep the bag in the vehicle. I will clear her." Duval's face tightened. "Anyone can save initials." Daniel read the next line. "Message sent at 12:16. 3 units in place." The silence after that was deep. Even the highway seemed far away. Maya looked at Duval. "You did not stop me because I looked suspicious. You stopped me because I looked too long." Duval said nothing. Daniel handed the tablet back to the technician. "Full extraction will occur under warrant, but the preservation is active." Maya turned toward the south road. "Bring Ray Collins." Daniel gave the order. 4 minutes later, a federal vehicle entered the station from the highway shoulder. Ray Collins stepped out from the back seat under the protection of an agent. He wore a dark jacket over his work shirt, and his hands were rough from years of engines, bolts, oil, and worry. He stopped when he saw Duval. For a moment, Ray looked smaller than Maya expected. Not weak, conditioned. A man who had trained himself to avoid eye contact with the person who could damage his life with a report. Maya walked toward him. "Mr. Collins, you are safe on this scene." Ray looked at the federal vehicles, trying to believe it. Then he saw the open gym bag. His mouth tightened. "That is the kind of bag Trevor brought," he said. Daniel asked, "Did Trevor Mills collect money from you?" "Yes." "Under whose pressure?" Ray looked at Duval. "Say it for the record," Daniel said. Ray breathed in. "Sergeant Duval, he never took the cash from my hand. Trevor did that. But Duval made the threat. If I did not pay, my customers would be stopped. My garage would be inspected. He said sometimes stolen parts show up when owners get difficult," Duval said. "He is bitter because we cited him for violations." Ray laughed once without humor. "You cited me after I stopped paying." Daniel nodded to the agent taking notes. Ray continued. "The first time it was $300, then $500, then $750. The last demand was $1,000. I did not have it. That is when I contacted the federal number." Maya asked, "Why did you keep records?" Ray looked at her. "Because I was scared. And because I was angry at myself for being scared." His voice cracked on the last word. No one rescued the moment with comfort. They let the truth stand. Duval looked around the station then. Linda, Ray, Kyle, the bag, the recorder, the camera, the federal agents, the city he thought was made of isolated people had become a connected case around him. Daniel stepped close. "Sergeant Frank Duval, you are being detained pending federal review for extortion under color of official authority, obstruction, witness intimidation, evidence tampering, and conspiracy." Duval lifted his chin. "I am police." Maya looked at the badge on his chest. That was the weapon. For the first time, his eyes flickered. Daniel moved behind him with the cuffs. Duval said, "You cannot treat me like a criminal." Maya answered, "Many innocent people said that to you. Tonight, the evidence gets to answer." The cuffs closed. A small metal click crossed the wet parking lot. No one cheered. Not Linda, not Ray, not Kyle, not Maya. Justice did not feel like celebration here. It felt like the first breath after years of holding air in the lungs. As Daniel led Duval toward the federal vehicle, Duval looked back at the store window, the car wash, the cruisers, and the people standing under the light. "This town will not talk," he said. Linda stepped farther from the door. "Yes, it will." Ray stood beside her. Kyle raised his head, and in that moment, Maya understood that the reveal had never been only about her true name. It was about every person Duvall had misnamed as scared, suspicious, bitter, confused, or alone. Now they had new names. Witness, survivor, officer of record, federal complainant, evidence holder. Duvall had lost control of the story, and when a man like that loses the story, the badge can no longer hide him. Sergeant Frank Duvall sat in the back of the federal vehicle with his hands cuffed in front of him, staring through the rain-streaked window at the gas station he had treated like a private checkpoint for years. Outside, the Midnight Star no longer belonged to fear. It belonged to records. One agent photographed the cruisers, one agent sealed radios, one agent preserved body cameras, one agent copied the gas station footage, one agent stood beside Linda Harris as she gave her first protected statement. Another stood beside Ray Collins while he repeated payment dates with his rough hands folded in front of him, each date sounding less like memory and more like a nail being driven into a locked door. Maya Carter stood near Pump 4 and watched the scene become official. That mattered. Pain could be denied. Fear could be dismissed. A poor driver could be called nervous. A clerk could be called confused. A mechanic could be called bitter. But evidence, if protected correctly, had a different life. It could travel through hands that signed their names. It could sit under seal. It could wait for court. It could speak when witnesses were too tired to explain one more time why they had been afraid. Daniel Reed walked toward Maya with a field tablet in one hand. "Preliminary count from the bag," he said. $76,400. Final count will happen at the field office. Maya looked toward the car wash. Phones, preserved. 2 devices from Trevor Mills. 1 device from Duvall. 1 from Nolan. Mercer turned his over voluntarily. Linda Drive, already copied for transport. Original sealed. Ray, protected. Maya nodded. "Then expand the hold to the department servers before Captain Briggs gets a phone call." Daniel gave her a small look. "Already requested. Good." The word sounded simple, but nothing about the night was simple. Duvall was not the whole problem. He was the face of it. Behind him were reports that had been accepted too easily, camera failures that had been excused too often, supervisors who had treated complaints like noise, officers who had learned that silence could be mistaken for loyalty. If the investigation stopped at Duvall, Briar Glen would only replace one shadow with another. Maya would not allow that. At 1:24 after midnight, Captain Harold Briggs arrived in an unmarked department sedan. He stepped out wearing a dark rain jacket over his uniform, his hair carefully combed, his face arranged into concern before he reached the federal line. "Agent Reed," Briggs said, "I need to understand why one of my sergeants is in custody." Daniel did not shake his hand. "You will receive the formal notice." Briggs glanced past him toward Duvall, then toward Maya. "And you are?" "Special Agent Maya Carter," she said. Briggs' eyes moved quickly over her clothes, the hooded sweatshirt, the wet boots, the old sedan. The face of a woman he now realized his department had surrounded under false assumptions. For a second, his expression betrayed him. Not shock, calculation. Maya saw it. Daniel saw it too. Briggs said, "There appears to have been a serious misunderstanding." Linda, standing near the store door, flinched at the word. Ray Collins turned away in disgust. Kyle Mercer lowered his head. Maya stepped forward. A misunderstanding does not carry $76,400 in a bag behind a closed car wash. Briggs' jaw tightened. "I am not here to debate facts before they are reviewed," Maya said. "Your department reviewed complaints for years. That is why the review now goes beyond your department." Daniel handed Briggs a preservation order. "All dispatch logs, body camera uploads, patrol vehicle location records, internal complaints, disciplinary files, use of force reports, and evidence room access logs involving Sergeant Duvall, Officer Nolan, Officer Mercer, the Highway 17 corridor, the Midnight Star, Collins Auto Repair, and Trevor Mills are under federal evidence hold." Briggs looked at the paper. "This is broad." Maya answered, "So was the fear." The captain said nothing. Because behind him, Linda was no longer behind glass. Ray was no longer alone. Kyle was no longer silent. And Duvall was no longer available to make witnesses smaller with a stare. Before sunrise, federal technicians entered the Briar Glen Police Department server room. They copied dispatch logs. They froze body camera uploads. They pulled vehicle location records going back 3 years. They sealed complaint files that had been closed without interviews. They preserved deleted camera audit reports from the Midnight Star and the car wash utility records connected to Wash Bay 3. By 8 in the morning, the old story had collapsed. By noon, a federal statement confirmed a public corruption investigation. It did not reveal witness names. It did not declare guilt before charges. It did not turn justice into theater. It said a local sergeant had been detained after evidence suggested extortion under color of official authority, obstruction, witness intimidation, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. The town read the statement in silence. Then people started calling. The first call came from a mother who had kept every document from her son's traffic stop because she said the report had never matched his face when he came home. The second came from a food truck owner who had paid cash after repeated inspections. The third came from a motel worker who had been told police could make her building impossible to operate if she refused help. By the end of the week, 29 new statements had entered the federal channel. Some were strong, some were incomplete, some were painful but not provable. Maya insisted every claim be treated carefully. Justice was not revenge with cleaner paperwork. Duvall had twisted the law by deciding who looked guilty before the facts existed. Maya refused to correct that abuse by making the same mistake in reverse. Every case had to be tested. Every witness had to be protected. Every accused officer had rights. That was not mercy for corruption. That was respect for justice itself. 2 weeks later, Frank Duvall was formally indicted. Trevor Mills entered a cooperation agreement after phone records connected him to payment nights. Brett Nolan was suspended first, then charged after his camera history and the plastic packet incident exposed a pattern of evidence handling violations. Captain Briggs was placed on administrative leave after federal reviewers found emails where he had referred to repeated complaints as community noise. Community noise. Maya read that phrase in a quiet conference room and did not speak for a long time. Daniel stood beside her. That one got to you. Maya looked at the printed email. That is what people call pain when they have already decided not to listen. The phrase later appeared in the oversight report. Not as emotion, as evidence. The report described a department where certain neighborhoods were treated as suspect by default. It described traffic stops justified after the fact with vague phrases. It described body cameras failing at critical moments without meaningful discipline. It described business owners who believed paying was safer than complaining. It described witnesses who had learned to speak only in pieces because full truth felt dangerous. It also described Pump 4, the place where the pattern finally met a record it could not scare. Linda Harris entered witness protection support during the first phase of the case. She did not disappear forever. She did not become a new person. She simply received the safety she should have had before courage became necessary. Ray Collins reopened his repair shop after 2 weeks away. At first, customers still looked over their shoulders when patrol cars passed. Then they returned one by one, not because fear vanished, but because it lost its biggest weapon. Kyle Mercer cooperated with investigators and faced discipline for his silence and his role in earlier stops. He did not become a hero overnight. Maya would not have allowed the story to lie that way. He had failed people before he helped them. Both truths mattered. In his statement, Kyle wrote one sentence by hand. I thought silence was neutral until I saw who it protected. Maya read it and placed it in the file, not because it excused him, because it told the truth. 3 months after the night at the Midnight Star, Briar Glen held a public oversight hearing in the old courthouse annex. People arrived early and sat quietly. Some had never entered a public meeting before. Some brought folders, some brought photographs, some brought nothing but memories they had been told were not enough. This time, they were allowed to speak into a microphone that did not belong to Duvall. A mother spoke about her son. A truck driver spoke about 3 stops in 1 month. A motel clerk spoke about a threat disguised as advice. Ray Collins spoke about cash payments, lost customers, and the shame of handing money to a system that was supposed to protect him. Linda Harris spoke last. Her hands shook when she unfolded the paper. For 11 years, she said, I thought telling the truth would make me the target. So I saved pieces. I saved video. I saved dates. I saved what I could. But I also stayed quiet. And some people were hurt while I was quiet. No one clapped at first. The room let the honesty breathe. Then Linda looked toward Maya, who stood along the side wall with Daniel. I didn't need to be brave alone, Linda said. I needed somewhere safe to put the truth. That sentence became part of the final reform order. Briar Glen Police Department entered federal oversight for a period of years. Body cameras could no longer be disabled without automatic alerts to an outside monitor. Patrol location logs became subject to monthly audit. Search consent required recorded confirmation. Complaints against supervisors no longer stayed inside the same chain of command. Businesses along Highway 17 received a protected reporting line. Training on lawful stops, evidence integrity, and duty to intervene became mandatory, but training alone was not allowed to be the answer. Policies changed, access changed, oversight changed, records changed. That was the only apology that mattered. One written into the system. 6 months after the arrest, Maya returned to the Midnight Star in daylight. No hidden recorder, no false license, no delivery bag, just a dark suit, a federal vehicle near the curb, and the small brass transit token in her pocket. The gas station looked different in the sun, smaller, less haunted. The car wash had new cameras on every corner. The old banner had been removed. A sign near the register said, "Security footage is backed up off-site. Safety concerns may be reported through the independent channel." Linda poured Maya a cup of black coffee. "You still take it plain," Linda said. Maya smiled. "Some things do not need improving." Linda smiled back. It was not a perfect smile. It carried memory. That made it real. Ray Collins walked in while Maya was paying. He bought water and sunflower seeds, then nodded toward the highway. "Customers are coming back," he said. "Good." He looked toward the car wash. "I still check that corner every time." Maya said, "So do I." Ray breathed out. "But now I keep driving." Outside, Kyle Mercer stood near Pump 4 in plain clothes. He had been removed from patrol during the review. His future was uncertain, as it should have been. Accountability that costs nothing becomes another kind of performance. Maya walked toward him. "Agent Carter," he said. "Mr. Mercer." He looked at the pump. "I keep hearing the moment I almost cuffed you." Maya did not soften the truth. "You should." Kyle nodded. "I know." They stood in silence for a moment. Cars moved on the highway. The sun flashed across the new camera lens above the store door. Kyle said, "Do you think I can come back from it?" Maya looked at him. "That depends on what you think coming back means." He waited. "If it means being trusted because you finally told the truth once, no. If it means spending the rest of your life proving silence is not your habit anymore, maybe." Kyle absorbed that. Then he said, "I wrote another statement, about 2 stops before that night, ones I should have reported." Maya studied him. "Good." He looked surprised. "That does not make me good." "No," Maya said. "It makes the record fuller. Start there." Linda stepped outside with her coffee pot still in hand. Ray held the door for her. Kyle looked down. For a moment, all 4 of them stood near Pump 4, the place where the town had watched power turn into evidence. No one called it victory. Victory sounded too clean. This was aftermath, messy, necessary, alive. Maya placed one hand on the hood of her federal vehicle before leaving. The metal was warm from the afternoon sun. No one had ordered her to touch it. No one had stood behind her with a threat. No false report waited to be written. She took the brass token from her pocket and pressed it into her palm. Her father once told her that public service should carry people through the dark, not abandon them there. For years, Maya thought that lesson had sent her into federal work. Now she understood it had sent her into rooms like this, places where the person being dismissed might be the one holding the truth, places where dignity had to be protected before anyone knew a name, places where justice began not with a speech, but with one person refusing to let fear be the only witness. Daniel waited in the vehicle. "Ready?" he asked. Maya looked back at the station. Linda stood outside the door now, not behind the glass. Ray walked toward his truck without looking over his shoulder. Kyle remained near Pump 4, not forgiven by everyone, not excused by the truth, but no longer hiding from what he had seen. Maya got in, ready. As they pulled onto Highway 17, the Midnight Star shrank in the mirror. The new cameras caught the sun. The road opened ahead. The case would continue. Hearings, motions, testimony, appeals, civil claims, old arrests reviewed one file at a time. Justice was not a single night of federal vehicles under neon lights. Justice was what happened after the lights left. But in Briar Glen, something had changed. A clerk who thought she would be called a liar had become an evidence holder. A mechanic who thought paying was survival had become a federal witness. A young officer who thought silence was neutral had learned what silence protects. And a sergeant who thought a badge made him untouchable had discovered that a badge does not place any person above the law. So if this story made you think of someone who was threatened, dismissed, or made to feel alone by someone with power, write their name in the comments. If you know someone who still believes silence keeps the peace, share this story with them. And if you believe respect should not require a hidden federal transmitter, subscribe for more stories where the overlooked stand tall, the arrogant face the record, and truth finds its way into the light. That night, Frank Duvall thought he was only threatening a black woman at a gas station. He thought the old gray sedan meant weakness. He thought the hooded sweatshirt meant nobody important. He thought the empty highway meant no witness would matter. He thought the town fear would protect him longer than the law could reach him. But Maya Carter had been watching. Linda Harris had been saving the footage. Ray Collins had kept the dates. Kyle Mercer had recorded the words he was afraid to challenge. And when the federal lights filled the Midnight Star parking lot, what silenced Duvall was not only the name Agent Carter, it was the realization that the woman he chose to intimidate had come to end the system that made him feel safe enough to try.